to the US now, where America's top diplomat Marco Rubio has been questioned by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, his first appearance since becoming Secretary of State. During the hearing, Mr. Rubio discussed the possibility of Syria falling into civil war, the difficulty of reaching agreement with Iran over their nuclear program, and the threat from China, and also Ukraine and Russia. One senator suggested to Mr. Rubio that President Putin is, quote, playing Donald Trump like a fiddle. Here's the Secretary of State's response.
Because the truth of the matter is, when Vladimir Putin woke up this morning, he had the same set of sanctions on him that he's always had since the beginning of this conflict, and Ukraine was still getting armaments and shipments from us and from our allies, and the European Union is about to impose additional sanctions, and the U.S. is looking for no Patriot batteries to be able to transfer from other NATO nations into Ukrainian hands. And what the president's trying to do is end a war. He's trying to end a bloody, costly war that neither side can win, and people are dying every single day.
Let's speak to our State Department correspondent, Tom Bateman. So, Tom, on the subject of Ukraine, what do you think we learned there?
Well, it was a consistent theme among Democrat senators, and what you heard there was a response, Marco Rubio's response to Jeanne Shaheen, the leading Democrat on the committee. And what was put to him was the argument that, as you heard, Vladimir Putin had played President Trump like a fiddle. She wasn't the only senator to use that expression. His argument was very much about sanctions, that all of those sanctions that had existed under the Biden administration continued to be imposed on President Putin, that he was waking up every morning still with those constraints around him, and that gave the US leverage. But we heard really senator after senator among the Democrats really push back at that argument and suggest that because the administration had not meaningfully and publicly called for concessions from Moscow, that had effectively weakened the Americans' leverage in this entire process. And that went alongside quite a lot of accusations that the Ukrainians had sort of been hung out to dry on several occasions, particularly on the issue of weapons support. Remember that pause that the Americans imposed on weapons and intelligence sharing earlier in the year. Again, Mr. Rubio pushed back on that and suggested that they basically needed to have the leverage with both sides in order to get the outcome that President Trump wants, which is a ceasefire.
And just taking us back to the Middle East for a moment, Tom, also some interesting insight into US communications with Israel.
Yeah, we got a confirmation basically from Marco Rubio that the Trump administration has been applying some pressure on its Israeli ally over the last few days to lift part of that aid blockade. Mr. Rubio saying that he was pleased that some aid had now finally been allowed in, but agreeing with the view that it was insufficient, so calling for more to take place. But it came among a few really testy exchanges on Gaza. That was in an exchange with Jeff Merkley, a Democrat senator, who asked Mr. Rubio if the administration was making it clear to its Israeli ally that it was unacceptable, in his words, to use food as an instrument of war. And also, he asserted that the Israelis had been systematically destroying Palestinian homes as a means to drive out Palestinians. And we got another interesting confirmation from Mr. Rubio there that they have been speaking to other countries about what he called the temporary relocation of Palestinians. Now, this had followed a report, a US media report over the weekend, that the administration had been speaking to Libya about taking up to 1 million Palestinians. That had been denied by the White House. Mr. Rubio said he wasn't aware of that, but he did say, as I say, that they're talking to some other countries about the movement. All of this, of course, in light of President Trump's ideas to expel Palestinians from the Gaza Strip and for the US to annex it, a move that would be in breach of international law, although the administration has always tried to characterize this as some kind of humanitarian gesture. But Mr. Rubio, therefore, putting a bit more emphasis on those reports.